council study session. Roll call tonight.
Councilmember
Here.
Councilmember Lewis.
Here.
Vice Mayor DeGolia.
Here.
Mayor Weiss.
Here. Got through that. Any public comments related to any item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comments. I'm going to bring it into the study session. Item number 1, priority setting the draft pedestrian and bicycle master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before I turn it over to Mike and Gordon, I just wanted to note, the study sessions, we set them up as, 2-hour meetings, one on the agenda. We usually get some policy direction and some feedback from the council to vet issues. And some of the items might require more heavy discussion, some of them require less discussion, but usually they have no time constraint where we have to have it done at that meeting for the next council meeting. So this evening, as an example, if you want to spend an hour and a half on the bike ped plan and then figure out for the sign one, you want an hour and a half for that one, but you're outside that 2-hour box that we established, you can always continue it to the next study session. There's no time pressure to move it right along this evening. So just wanted to make that point to the council before we turn it over to Mike and Gordon.
Okay, well, I guess it's been turned
Is it
over.
appropriate to ask a question on that piece?
Sure.
That's not related to the
Right.
agenda. If we want, I particularly felt that we had a problem with this when, I think it was the March study session, when we addressed both, the first time we addressed this master plan and we addressed the park plan. What is the appropriate form or venue to bring up that timing?
I mean,
Because
changing
I
the,
think I would like to have more flexibility than the 2 hours dictates. And when is that? That's probably a council meeting.
it's a council meeting discussion decision, and we set up study sessions, and I propose setting them up as a regularly scheduled meeting, first Wednesday of every month, and the council's concern was, well, maybe we won't have things on the agenda every Wednesday, so we might want to cancel a meeting here or there. So we didn't set them up as regular meetings, so they're technically special meetings of the city council set up on the first Wednesday of every month, and we put things on there to get feedback. And we made them far enough apart so that if you make a decision or provide some direction on a particular item, and we can continue to move it along, we can put it on that next, we have time to do the staff report, research changes, et cetera, to get it on that next item's agenda. And the idea was to restrict it to a 2-hour period of time to really focus the discussion on whatever was on the agenda in that window. But if, like I said, if we need to push something to another study session, we're happy to do that. There's no, we usually don't put it out there.
My question is, if we wanted to push it to a 3-hour session, rather than push it to the next meeting, what's the proper venue to bring that discussion up?
So could I make a comment about that? If we were going to do that, that would be fine with me, as long as it's not on the same night as the airport roundtable. Because, and they meet every other month, first Wednesday of every other month, like for tonight, they meet at 7, and I have to be in Millbrae. And that's why, 4 to 6 is kind of the bracketed time.
That's reasonable.
Okay, otherwise I can't get there.
Plus you've got Park and Rec.
No, I've got Park and Rec, right, I mean, it's always, every month, every month it's a problem for me, because I have Park and Rec.
Right after.
Park
They
and
start?
Rec tonight is starting at 5,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna miss part of it. But,
So we
but
start
I,
at 3.
it's still,
We could.
Yeah,
Well, I think where we run into troubles is when we have 2 heavy items.
okay, well, we can talk about it later, I don't want to take up time on it now.
but, yeah, I agree with Vice Mayor DeGolia that in the March meeting, we didn't really have enough time to kind of, go through all of the detail and the issues and in combination with the other Park and Rec plan.
Okay, all right.
Actually, that's probably a great segue into this, because we can't start building anything tomorrow anyway. You may remember in March, the draft bicycle and pedestrian plan was presented to you. It was the result of the consultants' efforts and the stakeholder advisory group with modified with their input. And in order to adopt a master plan, and we have a number of them in the process right now, as you know, the environmental work has to be done. So Lisa's been working on that with the consultant. She's got iteration number 2 of the environmental work. So the actual master plan, this document, won't be coming to you until another month or 2 when the environmental work is done and ready for adoption. At that point, we could actually start doing some work. However, we thought it would be very helpful for staff to get some direction from you so that we could start preparing requests for proposal from engineering firms to do some of the more detailed work. And in some ways, it's great. I used this tonight to mark up some things on the map. And this is kind of analogous to what the planners did. They went out, they looked at it, they bicycled with Councilmember Widmer and other residents to look at things. But it's a broad brush stroke, broad brush approach. In order to really get down to what needs to be done, whether a grate into a storm drain needs to be changed, whether some paving needs to be done, whether a half a foot of widening needs to be done, we'll actually need to do engineering, and for that you'd want to start with probably preliminary engineering on a particular route. So what we're asking for at this study session is some further direction, taking the number of projects that are in the master plan and not refining them, because the refinement will occur with the technical analysis, but giving us some priority setting. At the study session in March, I went back and kind of reviewed that material. It would appear that the council was directing us to look first at the safe routes to schools, not to say don't do anything on El Camino Real, because that's obviously been a very high priority of the council, but recognizing it's a state highway, it's a much longer lead time, and Mike's been working with them on that. So you could say, hey, we want to start initial work, and we'll work on the operational side in El Camino Real, and work on Project X, and work on Project Y. So we're looking for that kind of feedback.
So good morning. I think that one of the things that we said at the past meeting was that we pointed out that the bike pedestrian team that put things together told Alta that the town and the region's input was where we were having lots of problems, and that was one of the areas why we talked about Middlefield, where there were 17 issues with accidents, etc., primarily with pedestrians as well as bicyclists, more so than anywhere else. Oak Grove was another area. The Oak Grove intersection was one that was key highlighted, and that safe routes to schools was a priority. And so, as opposed to some of the other areas, which perhaps maybe can be done very cheaply, very easily, just by putting some signage on the street saying this is a shared route, and by the way, turn right, turn left, etc., which was okay. But the major investment that came from the citizens group was those areas, and that was our primary concern. So I think that's where we more or less left it.
Right.
But we did run out of time.
Yes. And so to that extent, what I've done, I've tried to look at some of these routes, and I was going to suggest, if you want to start with that priority, because that's correct, the focus of the council, as I understood it, was safe routes to school. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations under that heading in the master plan. And we could start on those, because I expect over time you're going to want to discuss each of the projects. Before we do get into the specifics, though, let me just, in terms of, set some context in terms of funding. Just to refresh your memory, the total list of projects in the master plan, and this is their high-level estimate without getting down to widening streets or needing to change a storm drain or something, was about $12 million worth of work. About half of that was on El Camino, leaving about $6 million for the other recommendations that they had. Council has budgeted $500,000 this year, and then a subsequent $100,000 per year for each of the next 4 years. So even if you said we want to spend all the money that we budgeted, it's less than 1/6, not in counting inflation, of the non-El Camino Real work. So by that, just because of funding, you're gonna have to do something in terms of setting priorities. Now, you could decide, hey, we wanna do preliminary engineering on everything, so we have better numbers on everything. It's one possibility. But then nothing's gonna be seen by the residents. You could decide, unlike the direction you gave last time, instead of safe routes to schools, we wanna put in the class 3 bikeways. Class 3, as I pointed out, basically, as Councilmember Whitmer said, with wayfinding signs, maybe some stripes and things. There'd be a lot of linear feet of work done, but it wouldn't change very much in the city. It'd be some wayfinding. Or you could focus on the safe routes to schools. At your pleasure, if you don't have any specifics or want to change that, what I would propose to do in the roughly hour we have this afternoon is to focus on the safe routes to schools projects and ask that you decide whether those indeed are the priority that you want to pursue. And then what I would suggest is we would look for those projects to start doing some preliminary engineering.
No, another question. So anything we talk about today with regards to funding, that doesn't preclude the work that I think that Public Works was going to put together with looking at when you do permitting, you have to upgrade your frontage. So all that's going to go on regardless. That's not, we're not unprioritizing that. So that's something that needs to happen. And my thought was we were getting ready to move forward. So the only thing we're looking for is the things we're actually going to spend money on with regards to putting down new striping or putting down new pavement or something like that.
Right. Although I point out that's a policy matter in terms of requiring changes in the right-of-way as a frontage. That would be a policy matter that would have to come to council, presumably with some kind of triggering mechanism based on the amount of building to be done. It's not currently part of our landscaping standards. But yes, we can do that. Yes.
You want that to be consistent with whatever goals and priorities you set out this evening.
Right.
So just a comment about, the overall large number of $4 million to do everything at some point or another. There are grants that are available for this type of improvements in our cities and communities throughout the town. And I do not want us to think that, we have to shoulder the entire responsibility. I think that if we can identify the project and look at the grants that are available, I know that there are grants, more money coming through the Transportation Authority, the MTC, the STIP programs, all of that, and especially for bike and ped safety. So I thank you for pursuing the other grant that we talked about in the council, but I just don't want us to not look at that as part of our funding source and have a bigger picture in mind than just doing, say, wayfinding, striping.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right, and council took steps in that regard some months ago, and we submitted a grant to MTC for a portion of the work on El Camino, and so we're still waiting to hear from that. But yes, we get those notices, depending on the grants, once or twice a year. We look for those and sort of try and map their requirements against our needs and the probability based on how they will score it. So some of them require cooperation,
Matching
some
funds.
require matching funds, so it depends, but absolutely, it is not, I did not mean to imply that the entire $12 million has to come from Atherton's coffers.
Okay.
That was the understanding.
Yeah.
What?
That was the understanding when they put this plan together, also you can identify that majority.
Sure, I just wanted to articulate
Yeah,
it
it's good,
again,
it's good.
so nobody forgets about it.
That's money out there. Right.
So two things. In addition to that, which is looking for grant money, some of these projects are going to go from one adjacent city to another. They're not just going to be entirely internal to Atherton. And we all know that when we do a bike or pedestrian path, the last thing we want is for it to die at the city limit. So we need to coordinate with those adjacent communities, and in some cases we might want to condition funding it on getting funding from that adjacent community who will participate in it. Not asking them to do work in our town, but the bike I mean, the best example I can think of is the discussion that we've had along Marsh Road.
Sure.
If we were to do something along Marsh Road, we have to coordinate with either Menlo Park or the county. And I think some of these we might want to prioritize on the condition that we get funding from that adjacent community. Okay, that's one point. Second point is, I feel very strongly that the direction that we gave at the March meeting is still the right direction. The priority should be safe routes to school. We've got to protect the kids who are going to school, and we have to enable kids in Atherton to be able to ride their bikes and walk to school safely, and that isn't currently the situation in many streets. I think that you've appropriately, and the task force has appropriately identified Middlefield as a critical street where we have a lot of students using that street, so I like that. I think, for me, the other priority, in addition to safe routes to school, is we're talking about a plan that is going to have a fairly, if it were all implemented, it would have a fairly significant impact on our town, on changing some of the roads by putting in Class 1 and Class 2 bike lanes. I want to show the residents how valuable that can be for the town by taking an example and making that happen first that they can see. So I am much more attracted to the idea of doing Middlefield from Fair Oaks to Ringwood as a Class 2 bike lane and really making it look good so that so it feels different than it is right now. I think that would be a statement to our residents that, you know, not only are we doing a good job, but we can do something that will take care of the kids who would use that and the adults who would use it. But I think that's a priority.
And a jurisdiction.
And it's a jurisdiction issue,
That's
so.
what gets money. That's what gets the grant money, because they're not gonna just fund Atherton. They're gonna
No.
fund
Right.
something
A
that's.
whole segment.
Yeah, and it's not just the kids that go there. There are a lot of workers that come down from North Fair Oaks as well as Redwood City to either come down and go to the Menlo Park train station or to work elsewhere in Menlo Park, et cetera. So, and actually, Middlefield, if you look at our general plan, which is something we'll end up having to do when we look at the pedestrian side of things, you know, it's one of these minor arterial things that's specifically called out that said that you can do more things on those streets than you can on other streets. So, I mean, those minor arterial ones are Middlefield, on Marsh, and the Alameda. And those are streets that we should probably focus on. And then we probably, as part of this, need to look at the general plan to see how we want to amend it to do some of the other things that we've identified.
Yeah.
I think those are all excellent points. And to that end, we're currently working with Menlo Park on the Class 2 bikeway on Valparaiso. They're still in the design of that. They've been very gracious to coordinate with us, and we'll continue to put some effort into that project. I did bring along the maps of the county bikeways. Party favors are always nice, so I can pass those out later, or pass them out now.
I have something.
But it's for that very reason, Vice Mayor DeGolia, that we do coordinate our efforts.
I know,
Okay.
that's several at home, I mean, I am,
So in any case, excellent points. But that's, because of the direction previously done, that's exactly why we suggested we focus on the safe routes to schools.
Are there any routes in here through Atherton, bike routes?
well, they show major areas they go to Atherton,
But
they're not necessarily
Not
designated that these are the safest routes to
Right.
take.
And so, you know, I kind of have, I think Middlefield is kind of the top of the list, and it's an obvious solution, because it's a straightaway, there are